I'm Malcolm Jamal Warner. The Pepsi-Cola Company asked me to introduce Eyes on the Prize, an extraordinary video about one of the most revolutionary changes for Americans since the Civil War, the Civil Rights Movement. Eyes on the Prize lets you witness the amazing events that had a lasting influence on all Americans and altered the face of the United States of America forever. You'll see this turning point in our history through actual filmed footage and first-hand reports. You'll see Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in action. Now, they were two of the most well-known advocates of civil rights during this time, but there were others, young and old, black and white. In fact, many in the movement were teenagers. They participated in marches, sit-in demonstrations, and demanded their rights along with millions of others, and they put themselves in great danger. Some even gave their lives so that we could live tomorrow with more hope for the future. Now, as we're watching the video, let's put ourselves in their shoes and ask what would have been our course of action. I mean, what would we have done if a group of people tried to prevent us from going to the school of our choice? They had clear goals and a plan, and they accomplished great things. Now, even though most of us weren't even born in the 50s and 60s, the events of those turbulent years should be an important part of our knowledge so we can better understand the world around us. Watching Eyes on the Prize might make you angry. It might make you proud, but it will most definitely make you think. So join with me and Pepsi-Cola in celebrating Black History Month with this special presentation of Eyes on the Prize.
I know the one thing we did right was the day we started to fight. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on.
On August 21st, 1955, two teenagers from Chicago boarded a train and traveled south to visit family in Mississippi.
We was going down there to pick some kiting because I never picked any kiting before. And I was looking forward to do that because I had told my mother that I could pick 200 pounds. And she told me I could, So we was going down there to look for a good time,
For more than a year, racial tensions in the South had been higher than usual, since the Supreme Court ruled in Brown versus Board of Education that segregated schools were unconstitutional. The decision touched a raw nerve in the white South, and many organized to preserve white supremacy. For years, groups like the Ku Klux Klan practiced terrorism. Despite national black protests, public murders of blacks were common, and the mobs who committed them went unpunished. In the previous 70 years, there had been more than 500 documented lynchings in Mississippi alone. Coming from Chicago, Curtis Jones and his cousin Emmett Till had little sense of the world they were entering when they arrived in Money, Mississippi.
Emmett Till was, at the time, he was 14 years old. Had just graduated out of grammar school. He had some picture of some white kids that he had graduated from. That was, female and male. So he told the boys down there, hey, you got around this store? This must have been around about maybe 10 to 12, youngsters around there, that the girls was his girlfriend, So one of the local boys said, hey, there's a girl in that store there, so I bet you want to go in there and talk to her, So he went in there to, get some candy. So when he was leaving out the store, after buying the candy, he told us, say, bye, baby. And the next thing I knew, one of the boys came up to me and say, man, you got a crazy cousin. He just went in there and said bye to that white woman. And that's when this man I was playing checker with, this older man, I guess he must have been around about 60 or 70, he jumped straight up and said, boy, Say, y'all about to get out of here. Say, that lady come out of that store and blow y'all brains out.
This is Mose Wright. I am the uncle of Emmett Lewis Till. Sunday morning, about 2:30, someone called at the door. And I said, who is it? And he said, this is Mr. Bryant. I want to talk with you and the boy. And when I opened the door, there was a man standing with a pistol in one hand and a flashlight in the other hand. And he asked me, did I have two boys there from Chicago? I told him I have. And he said, I want the boy that done all that talk. And they marched him to the car, and they asked someone there, this is the right boy? And the answer was, he is. And they drove toward money.
4 days later, Emmett Till's body was found in the Tallahatchie River.
The body was so badly damaged that we couldn't hardly just tell who he was, but he happened to have on a ring with his initials, and that cleared it up.
The body was shipped home, back north to Chicago, where Mamie Till Bradley insisted on an open casket funeral. So all the world can see, she said, what they did to my boy.
Oh, pilgrim of sorrow, and I'm left in this old wide world.
Jet magazine showed Till's corpse, beaten, mutilated, shot through the head. An entire generation of young black people would remember the horror of that photo.
No, for tomorrow.
Roy Bryant, husband of the woman in the store, and J.W. Milam, her brother-in-law, were arrested for the murder of Emmett Till. The trial was held in nearby Sumner, Mississippi. Black organizations like the NAACP and the Black Press worked especially hard to keep the case in the news, to make an example of Southern racism for the world.
I had covered the courts in many areas of this country, but the Till case was unbelievable. I mean, I just didn't get the sense of being in a courtroom. It was, first place, segregated. The black press sat at a bridge table far off from the court, and the boy's mother came down. They sat her there at the bridge table with us.
What do you intend to do here today?
To answer any questions that the attorneys might ask me to answer, to the best.
How do you think you could possibly be a help to them?
I don't know. I mean, just by answering whatever questions that they ask me.
I see. Do you have any evidence bearing on this case?
I do know that this is my son.
The defense argued that the body found tied to the cotton gin fan in the river was so disfigured that it could not be identified as Emmett Till. The trial took 5 long, hot days. The prosecution's star witness was Till's uncle, Mose Wright, who testified despite threats to his life.
He was called upon to, could he see anybody in the courtroom, identify anybody in that courtroom that had come to his house that night and got the Emmett Till out. He stood up, and there was a tension in the courtroom. And he says, in his broken language, "Dar he."
Dar he, there he is.
I really didn't realize how brave my grandfather Mose Wright was, you know. But after I got older, I realized that he was a brave man. He was a mighty brave man to travel back down there, you know, among all those hostile peoples and testify and get him up in court and point his finger at a white man and accuse him of murder.
As the trial ended, a defense lawyer told the jury he was, quote, sure every last Anglo-Saxon one of you has the courage to free these men. It took the jury an hour to find the men not guilty. Months later, for a fee of $4,000, Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam told their story to reporter William Bradford Huey.
Milam was startled at the belligerent attitude, or the fact that young Till didn't appear to be afraid of it. Now, he'd gone and gotten him out of bed and had him in the back of a truck, and young Till never realized the danger he was in. I'm quite sure that he never thought these two men would kill him. And, or maybe he's just in such a strange environment, he doesn't know what he's up against. And it seems, to a rational mind today, it seems impossible that they could have killed him. But J.W. Milam looked up at me and said, well, when he told me about this white girl he had, he says, my friend, that's what this war is about down here now. He says, that's what we got to fight to protect. And he says, I just looked at him and I said, boy, you ain't gonna never see the sun come up again.
I believe that the whole United States is mourning with me. And if the death of my son can mean something to the other unfortunate people all over the world, then for him to have died a hero would mean more to me than for him just to have died.
The fact that Emmett Till, a young black man, could be found floating down the river in Mississippi, as indeed many had been done over the years, just set in concrete the determination of people to move forward.
Like all cities in the South, Montgomery, Alabama had segregated buses. In interstate buses like this one, and in city buses, the whites sat in the front, the blacks in back. If more whites got on, the blacks had to give them the middle and back seats too. 3 months after the Till trial, Rosa Parks, a secretary for the NAACP, was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a bus to a white passenger.
And when the policeman approached me, one of them spoke and asked me if the driver had asked me to stand. I said, yes. He said, well, why don't you stand up? I said, I don't think I should have to stand up. And I asked him, I said, why do you push us around? He said, I do not know, but the law is a law and you're under arrest.
There had been arrest before. The black community was well organized and was now ready to respond. Leaders called for a boycott of city buses.
The people wanted to continue that boycott. They had been touched by the persecution, the humiliation that many of them had endured on buses, and they voted for it unanimously, and that meant thousands of people.
At regular mass rallies, the community constantly renewed its strength through song, prayer, and the encouragement of its ministers.
This show is your show. Not only is this show the show of Negroes in Montgomery, but this is the show of Negroes all over America.
The man they elected to help lead them was a new preacher in town, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. He was 26 years old.
We are not wrong in what we are doing. If we are wrong, the Supreme Court of this nation is wrong. If we are wrong, the Constitution of the United States is wrong. If we are wrong, God Almighty is wrong.
Before the boycott, 2/3 of the bus riders were black. After December 5th, there were almost no blacks at the segregated bus stops or on the buses. Many wondered how long would it take.
We thought that you could just shame America. So now, America, look at your promises and look at how you're treating your poor Negro citizens. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. But you know, segregation, you can't shame segregation. You can't, rattlesnakes don't commit suicide.
Month after month, the boycott continued. A wave of violence began. Shots were fired at city buses. Bombs were thrown at the homes of black boycott leaders, including Dr. King's.
Are you afraid?
No, I'm not. My attitude is that this is a great cause. It is a great issue that we are confronted with. And I have always felt that ultimately along the way of life, an individual must stand up and be counted and be willing to face the consequences, whatever they are. And if he is filled with fear, he cannot do it.
The boycotters rode black taxis. They organized a community carpool system. Mostly, they walked. After 11 months, it was the United States Supreme Court that finally broke the deadlock. The court ruled unanimously that Montgomery's bus segregation was unconstitutional.
The decision rendered by the Supreme Court yesterday was a victory. Yeah. But it wasn't a victory for colored folks. Don't make that victory that small. It wasn't a victory for 50,000 Negroes of Montgomery. It wasn't merely a victory for 16 million Negroes of America. That was a victory for justice.
We had won self-respect. And if you have never had the feeling to feel that this is not the other man's country and you are an alien in it, but that this is your country too, then you don't know what I'm talking about. But it is a hilarious feeling that just goes all over you, that makes you feel that America is a great country and we're going to do more to make it greater.
By 1957, 3 years after the Supreme Court ruled that segregated schools were unconstitutional, most black children in the South were still forced to attend substandard schools.
All the people of the South are in favor of segregation. And Supreme Court or no Supreme Court, we are going to maintain segregated schools down in Dixie.
And that was the resistance. They are not going to get equal treatment. What do you mean? Go to school with my little darling? And that is why resistance.
Little Rock, Arkansas was supposed to be different. It was a moderate city and a moderate state with an active NAACP. The Little Rock School Board agreed to start integrating its schools in 1957. In the first year, 9 black teenagers would attend Central High School. They were contemporaries of Emmett Till and grew up with the memory of the violence that had confronted Till 2 years earlier. Orville Faubus was the governor of Arkansas. A moderate by Southern standards, the black community had supported him in the past. But in his last election, he had faced tough opposition. He knew if he wanted to be reelected, he needed the segregationist vote. The night before school opened, Faubus decided to resist integration.
I have therefore, in accordance with the solemn responsibilities and the oath of my office, taken the following action. Units of the National Guard have been and are now being mobilized with the mission to maintain or restore the peace and good order of this community. Advanced units
are already on duty on the grounds of Central High School.
The Arkansas National Guard ringed the school with orders to admit only the white students. State troops were now being used to prevent enforcement of federal law. The first day, 8 of the 9 black students went to school together, accompanied by their parents and ministers. They were turned away by the National Guard. The 9th student, Elizabeth Eckford, had missed the call to gather with the others before school. She walked alone and faced a mob.
Well, it has to be the most frightening thing. I mean, because she had a crowd of white people behind her threatening to kill her. She had nobody. I mean, there was not a black face in sight anywhere. Nobody that she could turn to as a friend, except that this woman came out of the crowd and guided her through the mob and onto the bus and got her home safely.
In mid-September, President Eisenhower asked the governor to meet with him. The president thought he had convinced Faubus to admit the black students peacefully. Back in Little Rock, Faubus simply removed the National Guard, leaving only a small force of city police to protect the Little Rock Nine as they entered Central High School.
We entered the side of the building, thousands of people out front. And we were entering the side, and I could just get a glimpse of this group. And on the car, I could hear, on the car radio, I could hear that there was a mob. And I knew what a mob meant. And I knew that the sounds that came from the crowd were very angry. So we entered the side of the building very, very fast.
We've just got a report here on this end that the students are in. They're trying.
The mob was getting past the wooden sawhorses because the policemen would no longer fight their own in order to protect us. And so someone made a suggestion that if they allowed the mob to hang one kid, they could then get the rest out. And a gentleman, whom I believe to be the assistant chief of police, said, "How are you going to choose? You're going to let them draw straws." He said, "I'll get them out." And we were taken to the basement of this place. And we were put into 2 cars, grayish blue-colored Fords. And the man instructed them, he said, "Once you start driving, do not stop."
The rioting was headline news. The nation and the world saw unmistakably the face of resistance. Finally, President Eisenhower realized he had to act. That night, he sent in paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division.
This challenge must be met, and with such measures as will preserve to the people as a whole their lawfully protected rights. Mob rule can not be allowed to override the decisions of our courts.
We are now an occupied territory. In the name of God, whom we all revere, in the name of liberty we hold so dear, in the name of decency which we all cherish, what is happening in America?
Daisy Bates, state president for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, worked closely with the students and their families. Each morning, the students gathered at her home to begin their safe journey to school.
And the convoy that went from Mrs. Bates' house to the school, it had a Jeep in front, a Jeep behind. They both had machine gun mounts. And then the whole school was ringed with paratroopers and helicopters hovering around. And we marched up the steps with this circle of soldiers with bayonets drawn. I figured that we had really gone into school that day. And walking up the steps that day was probably one of the biggest feelings I've ever had.
Tell your mama, tell your pa, I'm gonna send you back to Arkansas. Oh, yeah.
It was the beginning of a school year like no other at Little Rock Central High.
When we got into school, they then assigned us an individual soldier to walk us from class to class. He waited outside the classroom, and every time the bell rang and classes changed, he would walk us. We'd have our own personal guide walking us to the next class.
The troops were wonderful. You know, there was some fear that they were dating the girls in high school. And I don't care what they were doing, they were wonderful. But they couldn't be with us everywhere. They couldn't be with us, for example, in the ladies' bathroom. They couldn't be with in gym. You'd be walking out to the volleyball court and someone would break a bottle and trip you on the bottle. I have scars on my right knee from that.
And I began to change from being somebody who I considered myself a moderate who, if I had my way, would have said, let's don't integrate because it's the state's right to decide, to someone who felt a real sense of compassion for these students and felt like they deserved something that I had. And I also developed a real dislike for the people that were out there that were causing the problems. It was very unsettling to me.
I'm Minnie Jean Brown. I'm thankful for the many people who have stood by us and worked diligently in our struggle for...
At school, the black teenagers were still being harassed by a few determined whites. Shortly before Christmas, Minnie Jean Brown struck back.
For a couple of weeks, there had been a number of white kids following us. A series of hassles, continuous calling us niggers, nigger, 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 one right after the other. And Minnie Jean Brown was in the lunch line with me. And there was this, I was in front of Minnie. Minnie was behind me, and there was this white kid, fella, who was much shorter than Minnie. Minnie was about 5'10". And this fella couldn't have been more than 5'5", 5'4". And he reminded me of a small dog yelping at somebody's leg. Minnie had just picked up her chili.
I could just see her little head click. She consciously said to herself, no, Minnie Jean, if you do this, you know you won't be here. But then this was the time of the year when we all didn't want to be there.
And before I could even say, you know, Minnie, why don't you tell them to shut up? Minnie had taken this chili, dumped it on this dude's head. It was just absolute silence in the place. And then the help, all black, broke into applause. And the white kids, the other white kids there, didn't know what to do. I mean, it was the first time that anybody, I'm sure, had seen somebody black retaliate in that sense.
When Minnie Jean was kicked out of school following the chili incident, maybe 15, 20 students brought cards and gave them out that said 1 down, 8 to go. When school was out in May, they still hadn't given up the fight. They came out with a 2-color card that said, Ike, go home, Liberation Day, May 29th, 1958, which was graduation day. They were still fighting the battle even then.
On May 29th, 1958, Central High School prepared to graduate 601 white students and Ernest Green.
There were a lot of claps for the students, you know. They talked about who had received scholarships, who was an honor student and all that as they called their names up. When they called my name, it was nothing, just the name. And there was this eerie silence. Nobody clapped. But I figured they didn't have to, because after I got that diploma, that was it. I had accomplished what I had come there for.
I'm so glad I'm fighting for my rights. Oh, I'm so glad I'm fighting for my rights.
The next year, Governor Faubus closed down all of Little Rock's high schools to halt integration. He easily won his third term as governor.